I think this is the biggest policy mistake in 95 years. And what is interesting is on the Republican Senate's website. So if you go to senate.gov and look up tariffs, this is what they say. It was on June 13th, 1930, that the Senate passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, describing it as among the most catastrophic acts in congressional history. Now, this is the Republican-controlled U.S. Senate. And it said, despite the fact that 1,000 economists wrote a letter to Hoover saying, veto it, he did not veto it. And then it goes on saying the results were, and to use their words, disastrous. So disastrous that the American public voted the Republicans out of the House, the Senate, and the presidency 2 years later.
President Trump signed an executive order last night aimed at ending collective bargaining rights for many government workers. The order applies to workers across many federal agencies, including the Departments of State, Defense, Justice, and Health and Human Services. Earlier today, I spoke to the president of the United Automobile Workers, Sean Fain, about President Trump's efforts. Since you brought up this executive order, it regards an effort by the Trump administration through the president to stop or certainly dramatically slow collective bargaining for federal workers. Randy Irvin, who's currently the president of the National Federation of the Federal Employees, calls it the biggest assault on collective bargaining he has ever seen. Do you agree with those sentiments?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, spot on. Look, I remember when I was 12 years old when Reagan busted the PATCO workers. You know, that was a massive issue back then, and we heard a lot of people talk about the labor. Yes, and you know that you know labor should have done more then. Look, this is 100 times worse than PATCO ever dreamed of being. When you're talking, you know, 700,000 people, their contracts just being taken away, and so, you know, as I said, you know, free speech is under attack. Unions are under attack. You look at the changes to the NLRB. You look at the situation with the Department of Labor, Department of Education, you know, Veterans Affairs. I mean, why are all these things under attack? Medicare, Social Security. It's because, you know, billionaires want more tax cuts for themselves. And that it's been proven time and again, that's not what works for America. That's not good for the American people. The working class people in America, they want their fair share. They're not asking to be rich. They just want a decent standard of living. And again, that goes back to what we call our four core issues. You know, living wages, adequate health care, retirement security, and having some quality of life other than just everything revolving around work.
President Trump's 25% tariff on imported vehicles is getting a thumbs up from the president of the United Auto Workers Union. Sean Fain told Major Garrett the tariffs will bring jobs back to the U.S., but he said more needs to be done for workers.
Tariffs aren't the total solution. Tariffs are a tool in the toolbox to get these companies to do the right thing. The big part of this that gets left out a lot of times is if they're going to bring jobs back here, you know, they need to be life-sustaining jobs where people can make a good wage, a living wage, have adequate health care.
Things will likely run as usual here at the jetport. Union leaders tell me that TSA workers are not planning any kind of strike or walkout, but they do warn that some people might quit because of this and say without a union contract, it might be harder to replace them.
I think they're just totally wrong, and it affects a lot of people.
Bill Riley is the regional vice president of Maine's AFGE chapter, which represents 140 Maine airport employees. He says their contract covered benefits from free parking to paid sick leave. Without it, he says there's confusion over day-to-day issues.
Nobody seems to know the answers to all these questions because it was done, I call it the Elon chainsaw. So we had a chainsaw massacre to our contract.
The Department of Homeland Security announced the termination of that contract on Friday. The agency says it will benefit travelers by allowing the agency to weed out, quote, poor performers. A spokesperson writing in a statement, this action will ensure Americans will have a more effective and modernized workforces across the nation's transportation networks. But travelers we spoke to at the jetport worry that cutting benefits will just push good people out.
They should not be taking things away from people that they need. think if, TSA employees start quitting, then I think that's going to cause issues for travel for a lot of people.
And without a contract, Riley says the union isn't allowed to represent their employees in any potential conflict with management.
I don't want to see anybody's livelihood interrupted because there's something the union could have stepped in and done.
Many people are already questioning the legality of this contract termination, and main unions are already pushing back. Riley tells me he's almost certain this issue will end up in court. At the Jedport, Anna Kuhn, CBS 13 News.
We got some breaking news for you right now because China's finance ministry is saying it will impose additional tariffs now on U.S. goods. That's going to start on April 10th at a rate of 34%. Joining us to discuss this as the markets continue to decline on the back of that news, literally just out moments ago, Jeremy Siegel, Professor Emeritus at Finance at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business and Chief Economist at Wisdom Tree. Good morning to you, Jeremy. We're always trying to get your wisdom in moments like this. You're often a calming voice. I don't know if you'll be a calming voice this morning, but as you see what's taking place with these tariffs, do you anticipate the market to turn around, or is this a falling knife that continues to fall?
Well, first, I want to pick up on what you said, Andrew, about the Smoot-Hawley Tariff. I think this is the biggest policy mistake in 95 years. And what is interesting is on the Republican Senate's website. So if you go to senate.gov and look up tariffs, this is what they say. It was on June 13th, 1930, that the Senate passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, describing it as among the most catastrophic acts in congressional history. Now, this is the Republican-controlled U.S. Senate. And it said, despite the fact that 1,000 economists wrote a letter to Hoover saying, veto it, he did not veto it. And then it goes on saying the results were, and to use their words, disastrous. So disastrous that the American public voted the Republicans out of the House, the Senate, and the presidency 2 years later. Now, to be fair, the Fed screwed up badly afterwards as the economy sunk as a result of this. And they're not going to do that again because they've learned that lesson. I don't know why Trump didn't learn the lesson of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, because I know the Fed learned the lesson of its mistakes in 1930, 31, and 32. That's one reason why the great financial crisis did not turn into a Great Depression. We flooded the banks with liquidity, which we did not do 95 years ago. But very honestly, I mean, they say it all. I wouldn't be surprised if President Trump scrubs this passage out of the website, because this is on the Senate Republican website.
Right.
The good news, I think the Fed is going to be lowering interest rates. I think they have to lower interest rates as a result of this global shock. And yes, there will be higher inflation, to be sure. But this is Joe described it as a self-inflicted wound. Unforced
Right.
error, did not have to happen. Supply shock. Powell himself said at the March FOMC meeting, we're going to see through the inflation impact of this. Now, some will object to it, but nonetheless, I think that actually, at first, I thought there was no chance of a May cut in rates. Now I think that chance has been increased
Right.
dramatically.
Jeremy,
unless
Jeremy,
Trump
as you're
makes a
speaking,
dramatic reversal on
Jeremy,
the tariffs.
As you're speaking, we should now note the Dow has continued to tumble. We're now down close to 1,000 points on the Dow, and that's picked up steam. That was about half of what it was almost literally 15 minutes ago. The Chinese finance minister making these comments about retaliation. I think the question, therefore, becomes the following. If, in fact, you think the Fed is going to try to mitigate what has turned out, or at least thus far looks like a man-made conundrum or whatever we're going to call it, do you want to own this market, or do you think that right now, given everything that's going on, it still has a lot more to go if, in fact, this is going to continue this way? Do you want to be in this market, or do you say everything's now on sale? I don't know the answer.
If you're a long-term investor, you're staying in the market. I'm staying in the market. If you're a trader, there are storms ahead as long as these tariffs remain. And I mean, this is what just happened, 10 minutes ago, is the nightmare result, the retaliation. And by the way, trade is a much more important part of the global economy than it was 95 years ago when the Smoot-Hawley Tariff was put on. So the implications are potentially a lot worse. So short run, very stormy. If you're a market timer, which I don't advocate, as we all know, 95% of non-market timers do very badly. You keep your powder dry. If you're a long-term investor, these tariffs are not going to be forever by any means. There will be brighter days, to be sure. And, the American economy is basically going to be the greatest economy in the world, as it has been over the last 20 or 30 years. So,
Jeremy,
yes.
You bring up this very good point about this being the nightmare scenario with China responding. I think the bigger question is, does that embolden other nations to do the same?
Perhaps it does.
Nobody wants to go first, but...
Yeah, I mean, they go first, and that could do that. Embolden others. As you said, many of the European nations have sort of wait and see. When this will end, who knows? We might. Trump might have to wait until public opinion polls come out on this. I don't think they're going to be favorable. Maybe he'll reverse himself, declare little victories. He can get some phone calls to some, and he's going to get some, selective reductions, saying, "Oh my goodness, this is a mistake." Let me try to declare victory. So let me warn short sellers that it's also a very risky proposition. But staying as it is, if you're in a recession, a normal recession produces a bear market. We are not in a bear market now.